Today I want to talk about why I believe I got into the schools that I got into, and why I think teacher recommendations are so important, and why I think a lot of students are missing the point of what it means to try your hardest in school right now, get good grades, all that stuff, apply to a great school, and to try to channel whatever passions that you have right now into something fruitful and valuable to your school, to your community in the future. This is what schools look for in applicants, especially at the top tier. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, MIT, these places I think really want exceptional students. And I just want to share with you one of those one of the components I think that made my application so successful. I was good enough to get into Yale, which I went and graduated from Princeton, Columbia, Dartmouth, a bunch of other Ivies. So I'm going to read to you today one of my teacher recommendations from my history teacher, and maybe try to show you or highlight what someone else saw in me when I was in high school, when I didn't know anything, when I was an idiot, but saw something valuable enough in order to share to the admissions committee, and now looking back, why I believe I got into the schools that I got into. Because I know there's some craziness right now. What should I be doing? What teacher recommendations should I get? What should my essays be about? But I think it's much more important to talk about the story and about the individual rather than all of the other superficial things that matter, but don't matter nearly as much as who you are and what you're bringing to the table as a human being. To preface this references some things like some of my hobbies at the time, and they're still my hobbies today. Like I like collecting old fountain pens. So there's a bunch of references to some fountain pens in here. This was something that I wrote a lot of my essays about: fountain pen collecting, vintage fountain pen history, research, and buying and selling, things like that. So with that said, I'll read you one of my recommendations that got me into the Ivies that I got into. October 2010. Oh my God. To whom it may concern. George is the best student that I've ever had the pleasure of teaching. This is no small feat. I've had many excellent Ivy caliber students. However, it was obvious right away that George was brilliant and different than all the rest. We were discussing the Declaration of Independence in class, and the question was asked, why do some things seem to last, like the Declaration of Independence, and others seem to fade with time? I mentioned that whether there are a few seminal recordings of Robert Johnson or Shakespeare's Sonnet 116, those things which speak to a deeper part of our being survive the test of time. We moved into contemporary examples of what each of us thought was something that would survive the test of time. George suggested the classic Parker 51 pen. I have heard of Parker pens, but I had no idea that the Parker 51 was the quintessential pen, or that George was our resident expert. Later on that week, as I searched through a junk drawer in my kitchen, I ran across a Parker pen. On the side was written in silver lettering Pan Am, and as I inspected the pen closer, I realized this was a genuine Parker 51, the same pen George was talking about in class. At first I thought, how ironic, a classic pen advertising a defunct airline. I had and have no idea where this pen was from, or if it had always been in the drawer, but a realization dawned upon me. I was reminded of learning a new vocabulary term and then seeing it several times the following week, seemingly for the first time, and wondering whether, like the pen, those words had always been there. This is George's gift. He has the ability to see the ordinary differently than the rest of us. What's more, George has the ability to help others see it differently too. I found having him in class not only made his fellow students want to be more erudite, it made me feel the same way. Seldom does a student have this effect on a teacher, but George is no ordinary student. Whether he is riffing on the trumpet with Wynton Marsalis in Lincoln Center or playing in the All-State Band, George humbly and quietly brings his brilliance to bear. He brings it to bear in his music and in his studies. George scored a near perfect on the SAT and remains at the very top of his high school class, having taken a who's who of the toughest classes we offer, 9 AP classes at last count. These are all important in understanding George, but there's more. He is modest and well-liked by his peers. George makes the intellectual cool and people love to be around him. When I started this letter yesterday, I thought of the Parker 51 that started it all. As I looked for the pen, I realized it wasn't in the kitchen drawer. I described it to my wife, and she said she had thrown it out that very morning because it was out of ink. Digging through the garbage, I pulled the Parker 51 out of the trash, none the worse for wear, rescued from oblivion one last time. I decided upon writing this letter to give George the pen, because really, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have known it existed anyway. And it's still, even 10 plus years later, it actually still kind of gets me a little bit emotional. Again, this is actually the pen that my teacher gave me. And if you want to look up the Parker 51, one of the greatest pens of all time, one of the greatest design pens of all time. Still love it, still the best. The reason why I read the letter that I was able to get after applying and getting into school and everything, it's not about, oh, look at me, look how great I am, look how smart I am. I don't want that to be the thing that comes across with this, because trust me, I was an idiot when I was in high school. Maybe I still am. But the thing that I am still touched by is that my teacher at this time was able to tell more about me to the admissions committee in his letter than I was able to write about myself in all the different essays and all the different extracurriculars and all the different ways that I wanted to show how great I was, how smart I was, how much I deserved to be at these top elite institutions. And now in hindsight, I realize all for the wrong reasons. But I was fortunate that there was someone who was able to see more than just the superficial. Yeah, it's great that you get good grades. Yeah, it's great that you get good SAT scores. Yeah, it's great that you take AP classes. Yeah, it's great that you have your activities. But can someone else, an adult, talk about you as someone special, someone who's unique, someone that can bring something valuable to the community that you want to be a part of? That's why it's crazy, even after reading this, and it's been a while to see this. It's, as I said, it still kind of gets me a little bit emotional, because the story about something as simple as this pen, I think, had so much resonance to someone who believed in me so much to write this story down. True story, crazy story, actually. Poetic, I believe. But that was then one of the main reasons why I got into the schools I got into. I mean, maybe a little anecdote just to finish this up. One time when I was on campus at Yale, and it turns out that I ran into one of the admissions officers who, my regional admissions officer, and apparently he would always ask what you wrote your essays about or whatever, and he was like, oh, when I was telling him about some of the stuff I wrote about, and about fountain pens and about the Parker 51, which was part of some of my essays, he's like, oh, you're the fountain pen kid, and your teacher gave you that pen. And I'm like, what? Like, that was crazy that was the connection, or but in reality, maybe that told all they needed to know. And I was there, trying to be president of this club or that club, trying to get this award or this score or whatever. And this was still at a time when I was still trying to get a perfect score on the SAT and all this craziness. But now looking back, I think the thing that mattered most was the passion, or the thing that I cared about the most, which I was maybe even a little bit embarrassed about or didn't really think was that all that important. But once again, that was highlighted by a teacher, by an adult, by someone who interacted on an intellectual level, a personal level, that was able to share this story to really fight for a position and to, try to convince this admissions committee that I was worthy, hopefully, of trying to continue this passion and this interest, even in something as insignificant or seemingly insignificant as vintage fountain pens. So I just wanted to read you that. I wanted to read you that because I know a lot of people are asking about, well, what should my essay say, or so should my teacher recommendations? And I know right now especially is a crazy time to be applying to school. But my advice that I like to give you is more of that. Don't be the idiot And instead, try your best to highlight and to expose and to show and to share the things that truly matter, the things that make you interesting, that make you unique, that make you eager to learn, that make you excited. And I hope that that doesn't sound cliche. I hope that that doesn't sound hollow, because in my opinion, this letter was the reason why I got into the schools that I got into. In many ways, this pen is the reason why I got into a lot of those schools, because that story almost seems stranger than fiction.